that's military. You can't have that. We had helmets, you know, flakjack. No, you can't have that. That's military. Cameras. No, you can't have that. I mean, they had 1,000,001 reasons why you couldn't have whatever it was that you had to what you needed to do your job, and they would take it away. And Heba was mentioning earlier, in our hotel, the government had gone to the owners of the hotel and told them, look, we're turning on CNN and BBC, and we can see that they're shooting from those balconies, and they're showing. So they insisted they go door to door and search the rooms and seize any equipment. And it was one of the times when I really appreciated not working for one of the major networks internationally, because they could turn on the BBC and they could say, okay, that's about floor 10, you know, and they could go out and get the knock on their doors and seize their stuff. Same with CNN, and they both lost all their gear. And in our case, they couldn't flip on the CBC in Egypt, and we were on floor 25, nicely shooting down. And they did come and search our rooms, but we had worked out a deal where, you know, we had our doors locked, and when anybody would knock at the door, everybody would run, hide their stuff under beds and in bags and things like that, and then kind of innocently look like we were kind of working on our laptops. And
where are the pyramids? Where are the tourist
tourist stories, and we got away with it to the point where CNN started using our shot because they had their cameras seized there and everybody else, and you know, it was score one for the little guys, which definitely on the international scale, CBC is one of the little guys. But overwhelmingly, it was dealing with people taking away your gear, government people, and then just trying to figure out, I don't know, I'm sure you guys had the same experience. I mean, for part of the time, you were going out every day, and if you wanted to get to the square, you had to go through the path of pro-Mubarak supporters to get to the other side. And they were in kind of a nasty bunch. And
yeah, I mean, I think that this was the first time on an assignment where I had encountered the mob. And you know, I mean, I've been to places like Afghanistan, you know, where I'm worried about getting blown up by an IED. This was the first time that I encountered a mob, which was literally face to face with me, hating me, physically violent towards me, and didn't care to know anything about me, you know, or what I was there to do. Didn't care that I was doing. I mean, Michelle and I talked about this, like, typically, you know, I mean, there are some cases where, as a journalist, you can go and you can talk to someone who hates the West, but you can say you're here because you want to get their point of view out. You're gonna tell their story to the West, and they're, you know, actually incredibly polite to you. They'll serve you tea and they'll serve you dates. But in Egypt, it was the first time that I'd had that experience of being mobbed, and that was something I think that was a little bit particular to these sort of revolutions, and maybe particular to Egypt as well, because there were, I mean,
why were you an enemy? Like, why did they not like you? You were there
because I'm a foreign journalist.
And they assumed you were on the side of Mubarak, or
they assumed, you know, I mean, state television was saying foreign journalists are inciting violence in Egypt, and so if you were found out as a state journalist, literally you would get attacked. And so, you know, that happened to Patrick and I one day. Luckily, we were able to sort of, you know, get out of that situation. But I can tell you, I mean, it was the scariest situation I've ever been in. That was something that I didn't write about, ironically enough. But, you know, we were saved because these security guards rushed out of this building, they shot some guns in the air, and in that moment of the crowd freezing, they rushed us into this apartment building, and this incredibly kind woman on the first floor, trying to be the janitor's wife, opened her door and hid us inside her apartment with her 3 kids. And we were sitting there, we were watching Dora in their bedroom on television while the mob was like chanting for our death outside. You know, this was an irrational mob. You know, and you know, in retrospect, when we look at them and who they were, there were all of these. You know, there was evidence that they had been paid by the regime to be there. They were carrying signs that had obviously been pre-printed. I mean, this was organized things. It wasn't a random thing. But it was something that was the first time that I encountered that specific kind of danger. And I think that. You know, that mob was what happened to Laura Logan and other journalists. And, you know, I was, again, incredibly lucky. Patrick was incredibly very lucky to get out. But you know, that was what happened to Laura. I mean, this was a mob that attacked her.
How about, yeah,
I have a couple of different thoughts. I think first, just to clarify your point, there was also a perception, apart from what the state was, the propaganda the state was putting out there, that the journalists were on the side of the protesters. And I don't think that was an unfair perception. And I think with all these revolutions, we all have to sort of ask ourselves, have we really been objective, and have we gotten caught up in a certain
I have to say,
narrative?
I think it is an unfair perception, because that day that we were in Mohandisine, right, which is,
Okay.
you know, I mean, we were actually out there to speak to pro-Mubarak supporters. But, you know, the point is like, the mob doesn't care.
Yeah.
You know, the mob doesn't ask that question. You know, they just see you as a foreign journalist, and there's no dialogue there. There's just judgment. And, you know, in that particular case, that was, I think, what was most upsetting to me about it. I was like, no, like, I want to hear how you're feeling. And they're like punching me.
Yeah.
It's like,
And I found the one thing that I thought had a tiny bit of traction when I was in that situation was in Arabic telling them, I'm an Egyptian woman, would you do this to your daughter, would you do this to your sister? And trying to sort of hit the humanity in them. And only then did they sort of say, okay, well, at least we'll go take you to the military guy and let him deal with you. But yeah, I think it's definitely terrifying. And I'm not excusing them in any way, but I do think that a lot of journalists in these revolutions sort of lost themselves in the euphoria of the narrative.